This video is going to be about some of it about Fusion 360 and how to manage files for multicolor printing. So anyways, I just kind of wanted to show how I'm figuring out like some of my older models. Like I had designed this. This is actually a device side cover. So like a drone, there's a plug coming off the drone or any other thing that would plug into an XT60. This is the device side, just to keep dirt out of the plugs, whatever. So I had already created this months ago. It's one solid object, so obviously I can't, unless I go and use the paint feature, which I don't really want to do. This is how I found it to be the easiest. So what I will do is I'll create a plane. So I'll go to construction, offset plane. I'm going to pick the top of the body, which is actually the bottom when I'm printing it. And you'll see this plane appear. And then it allows you to pick a dimension either way. So I'm going to come down. I want to be right at like that filleted area. So I think I figured out earlier that's -3 millimeters. So now I have my area decided where I'm going to cut the solid object. So I'll go up here to, I think it's modify, split body. Then you select the body that you want to split. And then you have to tell it what your tool is, splitting tool. So I'm going to use my plane as the splitting tool. And it pops up a little red like this is the cutter. And it's cutting around the whole solid object. So I'll go ahead, okay. And now this is actually two separate objects. So now you can save these as different STLs. This is actually a really simple way to do it. You can also, when you're designing your parts, you can make it one part and not necessarily assembly, but when you're extruding, instead of picking join, pick new body, and it'll still be together like it should be, but it's still considered a separate body. So that way, if you have 30 pieces or whatever, you can save those as separate STLs. So what I'll do is I'll send these to print. So 3D print, I'm going to pick the bottom, top, whatever you want to call it. I do not have a 3D printer utility selected, so I'll just hit OK. And then that allows me to save it. Now I already saved this, so I'm going to say this is the device side base, and I'm going to do it in black, so I just name it black, just so I know. Yes, I want to override it. And then I'll do the same thing with the other portion. And that is I'm calling it the top because it'll be the top on the printer, and I want to make that yellow. So I'm going to save that. Yes. So now I'm going to go to Canvas. Now Canvas is an online cloud-based slicer. And it's okay. It took me a little bit. It took me a couple prints to get my printer dialed in, especially the Z offset. And I do 3D print fairly often, but there's times where I'll go months without doing it, so I forget things, but I was able after a few prints to get pretty decent prints coming out. So I'm going to go to Canvas, which is on the cloud. So I'm going to start a new project. I'm going to add models, and I'm going to do drop multi-material models here because I want to do multi-material. So I'm going to select those two files, open them up. Now I find that the Canvas slicer a little difficult to work with. So there's my model. I want it to be laying on the base, so I'm going to select the 3 dots is more, and you can put lay face on bed, rotate it around, and pick the back. Now one of the biggest things I found problematic for me is because I like to print, like when I make these for my eBay store, I obviously want to print more than one at a time. This is a small piece, and actually with the palette, what I found when I tried to print one is I was getting failures because the palette will go through the splicing process and it'll prepare as much material as it thinks it needs. And unfortunately, if you print one of these, it'll cut the material off and it'll actually have a failure because it won't reach my hot end before it's done feeding material. So you keep that in mind. If you're printing really small stuff, you're going to need to print multiples of them. Otherwise, you'll keep getting failures. And I don't think it's actually a problem with the palette, maybe some software updates could change that, but it just doesn't work. So you have to definitely print multiples of small items. So so what did I say I want to do? I want to do black on the bottom. So I have the spool holder that comes with the pallet can hold up to 5 rolls. Obviously you can only feed 4 materials, but I keep 5 on there. And I got to kind of figure out, so the black is towards the 3 and 4, so I'm going to make black 3, or 3 black. And then my yellow is close to 4, and I already have that selected. So what you want to do is just click and drag. So the bottom is black, and the upper portion will be yellow. And as soon as you start adding multiple colors, this transition block will show up. So I want to move this towards the front of my bed. Unfortunately, I have a little bit of damage on my bed in here, and I don't want it to show up on my print. Plus, I want to have multiple models. And this is where it's a little disappointing, because on most slicers, you could just right-click and it'll bring up some options like, you know, multiple items, and it will not do that. So the only way that I found to be able to do that is to bring in more files. It's a little time consuming, but I guess once you've done it once, the files are saved and you can just keep reprinting the same thing. But unfortunately, you have to go through this whole process. So I have to lay it flat, pick the back, lay face to bed, pick the back, and I usually like to do 6 of these at a time, so I have to do 6. So I'll stop the video here, and when I get to the point where I'm starting up the canvas, or the palette, I'll come back. Alright, so I'm back. So now I have my models arranged the way that I want them on my bed. I have 6 of them up there. You can see the transition block on the left. And for the models that I've made so far, small, not a ton of colors, not real complex, my transition blocks have not been huge. I mean, they're not small. Yes, it's wasteful, but I'll deal with that for the ability to have multiple colors. So filament's fairly inexpensive. I guess if you're doing big prints and you have a failure midway through, it kind of sucks. But so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slice this. And this is the part that I love, because I don't have the, I have an Octoprint instance on my network, so I didn't have to buy their hub, which they openly tell you that. So it's much cheaper if you just have if you're already set up with Octoprint, you don't have to spend $130 for the Hub Plus or Hub Pro, whatever it is. So anyways, I'm going to go to slice. Like any other slicer, it's going to do its magic. This is the part that I really love, because it's, I've always had to like save it to a file, then I had my Fire tablet. I had to keep transferring files from folder to folder, and it was a pain. But with this setup, I can simply send it to the Canvas hub, and it'll send it to my Octoprint, which I'm gonna move over to there. All right, so over here, it's popped up that I have a new file, device side. I already have preheated my printer, so I can come down here and select the print option. But when you're doing multiple colors, it'll actually have this little palette 2 icon in the file, and that basically lets you know that there's actually 2 files there, one for your printer and one for the palette 2. It's much easier. If you do get a palette 2 or any palette, I would suggest either buying their hub if you want like a plug and play option, or having Octoprint set up, because it makes it so much easier. You don't have to mess with SD cards, and if you do it unconnected, you have to have an SD card for your printer and one for the hub or the palette, I believe. So anyways, so my next step is I'm going to just select to print this. And what it'll do is it'll pop up with some form of like a, so the pallet's starting to heat up. So it'll tell you you're about to print with pallet 2. Your print will temporarily be paused. This is normal. Please follow the instructions of the pallet 2 screen. So that's our next step. So basically now it's telling you to insert the black filament into input 3. So it actually has like an LED light that lights up below the area that you're supposed to feed the material into. So it said input 3. So input 3 is here. I'm going to slide it up there and it'll take off. And the thing that's great about it too is it'll tell you what slot each color needs to go into in case you forget. So yellow needs to go in input 4. So I already have my yellow. It's not actually into the drive gear, but it's there. So I'll just push it up a little bit. I'm just feeding the yellow in. So now it's feeding material in. And it's going to have to do splices, whatever it needs to do to get prepared for the print. Excuse my printer, it's kind of a messy, it's a hypercube that I built. Obviously I didn't do a very good job wiring, but the printer works really well. And no one's here to look at it except for myself. But they provide you with this tube. I'm using the short one as they recommend for a Bowden extruder. The only thing I had to really do to my printer was this little piece. Their tube goes into it. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and stop the video, and when the material is ready, it'll be coming out, and actually it's almost there already. So you'll see the materials coming out. So then they tell you to feed it. It'll actually give you instructions right on the screen. Feed filament into your printer's extruder gear. So what I do, because I know I have some problems going into the PTF tube, whatever it's called, I actually feed it past a little bit. It hasn't really caused a problem for me. So I'll go ahead and feed that in, and then I'll come back with the video because I can't do it one-handed. Okay, so now I have my material fed into the extruder. Now it will tell you, you hit next. It'll tell you to clip your guide tube into the extruder, which is this piece right here. And I'll try to do it one-handed, but I don't know how well it's going to work. Okay, that worked. And then you hit next. So this is where on your initial print you'll have to manually feed material till it goes through your tubes and reaches your extruder down here. But since the first print it's been good, so I hit the smart load tab and it'll actually feed the material automatically for you. Now this does take a little bit of time. As you can see, it's feeding material in. But there'll be times where it stops to do splices, so it, it can take a little bit of time. So I'll go ahead and stop the video again, and when this is ready to print, I'll show you how to start it and go from there. All right, so my material is fed to the extruder. You'll get a pop-up on your Octoprint instance. The filament is placed and you're ready to go. You can start the print here, but I normally do it on the pallet 2. I don't know why, I just like to do it that way. So on the screen for the pallet 2, it'll also tell you that it's ready also. Remove any purged material. So I'll come around. As you can see, it came forward enough where there's purged material. I'll clean that off. And I'll go ahead and hit start on the pallet 2. Okay, so my print has completed. It'll tell you how many splices it did, how many pings, the length of material, the total print time. So if it's a good print with good transitions, you can go ahead and save. So I guess the palette learns from each print. So I'm going to save that information. As you can see, it did a really nice job. There's the transition block, not too terrible, but I know these are smaller items. But the color separation to me is very good, what I'm looking for. Here's one of the pieces by itself. I do not see any black in the yellow, so it did a very good job of transitioning between the two colors. So that's it, guys. I hope you found this video helpful.